start yet? Sorry. There we go. Hi, I'm Florian Castle. I'm running with the Communist Party in Oak Bay Gordon Head, and I'd like to encourage everyone to go out and vote either on the 24th or through advanced voting.
Sweet. Yeah, thank you for joining me, Florian, today. In case you didn't know, my name's Emily. I'm your UVic Student Society Director of Campaigns and Community Relations, and we'll be doing a 10-minute interview with Florian today on issues that impact students the most. So with that being said, let's start it off on a fun note. Florian, best brunch place in Victoria?
Well, number one's my dad's cooking, and then number two, probably Shine.
Fair. Do you have like a favorite hiking or walking location in your riding?
In it's not my riding. In Greater Victoria, if I'm feeling ambitious, I like to go up Empress Mountain out in the Souk Hills. It's about a 5-hour round trip. But if I'm just looking for something quick, I just go up Mount Dog.
Sweet. And are you sort of a Netflix or Disney Plus kind of person? I feel like it says a lot.
Well, I actually have both, but I would support nationalizing both of them and making a publicly available streaming service for all Canadians.
I feel like that's a good segue to get into the real stuff.
There you go.
Yeah, so UVic students have expressed a strong desire to create a more socially just province. Current measures by municipalities to reduce systemic racism in police forces simply haven't solved the problem, and economic inequities in marginalized groups continue to create generational challenges for children, families, and communities. I'm wondering what specific changes you think should be made to the Police Act to address systemic racism in policing.
So the Police Act has 184 articles, so I can't touch on everything in a short period of time. But a big theme of it is that as Marxists, the Communist Party recognizes that under capitalism, the police is an institution that exists with the purpose of oppressing the working class and people of color. And we understand that under capitalism, the police will always be a force of oppression. I mean, we see this both with police brutality in the United States and here in Canada, just as we've witnessed the police serving to enforce the NDP government's criminal invasion of Wet'suwet'en land, right? It's no secret that the police is an institution of oppression in Canada and the United States. And so mere reform of police legislation is not sufficient to end the class antagonisms behind policing. And even the abolition of the police without addressing the underlying class antagonisms of capitalism will simply result in the replacement of the police with private mercenaries or fascist paramilitaries, that kind of thing, right? For the capitalist state, the police serves an essential function. Now, while recognizing the limited power of the provincial government, we will do what we can to mitigate the worst of policing. We intend to defund the police at the provincial level and divert resources to community aid programs. We also seek to eliminate the involvement of the RCMP as a provincial police force, and we will take measures to ensure police officers are held accountable for the crimes they commit.
Okay, thank you. And I'm also wondering how you plan to address mental health and other substance use challenges.
So first of all, oh sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there. First of all, the war on drugs and the opioid crisis both have to end. We intend to establish a permanent, safe, legal, and regulated supply of drugs. We want to expand mental health services and long-term recovery support programs. And while recognizing that not everybody who is a victim of the opioid crisis is living on the streets, there is a significant overlap there, and addressing homelessness is a big part of addressing the opioid crisis. And so we intend to build housing for all to save lives and reduce the social and health costs of street homelessness. And that also is a big thing with mental health. So on the one hand, we intend to put funding into making mental health services publicly available, but also recognize that the real material, concrete situations of people can really negatively affect their mental health. And so improving people's lives with things like universal housing, but also universal pharmacare, universal childcare, preventing layoffs as a result of COVID, and as well as various other social and economic programs we intend to do, we think will also go a long way to mitigate mental health problems among vulnerable people.
Great, thank you. Next topic. So students overwhelmingly believe that the climate emergency does require an immediate and effective response from all levels of government. I'm wondering what specific actions you will take to ensure that BC meets the required milestones of at least a 45% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 and ultimately net zero emissions by 2050.
So we want to cut hydrocarbon emissions right now. We're going to stop the Site C dam, the LNG/Coastal GasLink fossil fuel project, and the Trans Mountain expansion. We also want to institute free public transit for all, prioritize renewable energy and conservation. But I would say, perhaps most importantly, we intend to recognize and respect Indigenous title to all traditional territories and respect the right of Indigenous nations to veto development and to self-determination. And by ceasing the provincial government's efforts to obstruct the ongoing stewardship of the land by Indigenous peoples, we hope to allow them to continue their essential and ongoing role in protecting the ecosystem. So we see decolonization and protecting the ecosystem as necessarily going hand in hand.
Okay, thank you. And as a follow-up, if elected, are you committed to eliminating all oil and gas subsidies in BC?
Yes, we are. And in fact, we intend to nationalize the resource sector and use the proceeds to transition to a green economy.
Okay, thank you. So next subject, 4 years after Bill 23, which is the Sexual Violence and Misconduct Policy Act, we continue to hear from students that many post-secondary institutions have not implemented effective sexual violence and misconduct policies. So I'm wondering, how will you create and regulate minimum standards or funding for post-secondary institutions to really see these policies through?
So we would establish a commission to investigate sexualized violence and misconduct on campuses. Based on the recommendations of this commission, we would establish a set of guidelines for post-secondary institutions to follow. Institutions will be subject to review yearly and will receive penalties for failing to comply.
Okay, great. Yeah, so obviously affordability is huge. Costs like tuition and housing continue to rise while students' income have dropped significantly during the COVID-19 crisis. How do you plan to economically support students given that they've lost many sources of income while costs of education and housing continue to increase in your riding?
So we intend to build 100,000 units of new and renovated eco-friendly social and low-income housing. We want to stop rent evictions and dem evictions, ban all evictions during the pandemic, legislate stricter rent controls, and we would also institute security for workers affected by COVID-19 layoffs, including 100% recall rights and wage protection. We'll also fight to the best of our ability for free post-secondary education for all students, while recognizing that there's various sources to this funding, and you know, realistically, as the Communist Party, we're not going to be forming a government. If we were to elect members of parliament or members of the legislature, we would do everything we could to institute free post-secondary for all students, and also to ensure that aid like CESB and CERB continue to flow.
Okay, yeah. I'm also wondering, how will you address the housing shortage, particularly the acute housing crisis in Victoria that disproportionately impacts our student population?
So like I said in the previous question, we intend to build 100,000 units of new and renovated social and low-income housing that will also be eco-friendly. We plan to stop rent evictions and dem evictions, ban all evictions during the pandemic, and legislate stricter rent controls.
Great, yeah. I think repetition really gets it in there. So thank you for answering that more directly. I'm also wondering if you support changing the Transit Act to allow for a student representative to have a voting seat on transit commissions in BC.
Yes, absolutely. Of course, students are one of the primary demographics that uses public transit, and they should absolutely have a voice on transit commissions.
Short and sweet. Yeah, okay, great. So that being said, I think you've answered all of my questions quite concisely. So thank you so much, Florian. I'm wondering if you want to add a few words at the end here about your campaign or key voting dates.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'd say, well, again, a reminder, the election is on October 24th, but you can also vote through advanced voting. And I'd encourage everyone to go out and vote. And I'd like to say that if you are fed up with basically three parties that, to varying degrees, and with varying rhetoric, but at the end of the day, uh, all really support big business. I mean, you've got the liberals who are pretty mask off about it. You've got the NDP who pretend to be pro-worker, but at the end of the day are still doing things like, I mean, invading sovereign wet'suwet'en land, right? And then the Greens, who, if you ask me, are frankly kind of conservatives who recycle. I think that if you're looking for a real alternative, I recommend voting for the Communist Party to help build up a real progressive movement in BC and in Canada, and hopefully in the long run enact some real change.
Okay, yeah, thank you for sharing your perspective here.
Thanks so much.